The arrogant billionaire thought he was so clever, mocking the waitress in Arabic, believing she wouldn't understand his insults. But seconds later, her 7-year-old daughter calmly replied in perfect Arabic, leaving him speechless and humiliated in front of everyone. The golden sunset painted the windows of Amara's garden, a small Middle Eastern restaurant tucked between towering glass buildings in downtown Chicago. Inside, the aroma of lamb shawarma and fresh pita filled the air, while traditional oud music played softly in the background. Sarah Martinez wiped her hands on her apron, exhaustion evident in her dark eyes. At 29, she carried herself with quiet dignity, despite the weight of endless double shifts. Her long black hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her uniform bore the subtle stains of a 12-hour workday. "Mama, can I help with the salt shakers?" asked Emma, her 7-year-old daughter looking up from her homework at a corner table. The little girl's bright eyes sparkled with intelligence far beyond her years. "Finish your math first, mi amor," Sarah replied, managing a tired smile. The bell above the door chimed, and in walked Omar al-Rashid. At 25, he commanded attention without trying. His tailored Italian suit probably cost more than Sarah made in 6 months. Diamond cufflinks caught the light as he checked his Patek Philippe watch with obvious impatience. "Finally," Omar muttered in Arabic, his voice dripping with disdain as he surveyed the modest restaurant. What a pathetic little place. Sarah approached with practiced professionalism, her order pad ready. "Good evening, sir. Table for one?" Omar barely glanced at her, continuing his commentary in Arabic. "Look at this woman. Probably doesn't even speak proper English. These people come here and take our jobs, living like animals." Sarah's jaw tightened slightly, but she maintained her composure. Years of similar treatment had taught her to endure. "Right this way, please." As she led him to a table, Omar's cruel words continued flowing in Arabic. "I bet she sends every penny back to whatever hole she crawled out of. Disgusting how they multiply like rabbits too. Probably has 6 kids she can't afford." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she set down the menu. "Can I start you with something to drink?" "Water, and make sure the glass is actually clean," Omar replied in English, then switched back to Arabic, though I doubt she understands basic hygiene. That's when a small, clear voice cut through the restaurant like a knife. "Excuse me, sir," Emma said, standing up from her table. Her tiny frame seemed to glow with righteous anger. "But my mother understands every single word you're saying." Omar's blood ran cold. The restaurant fell silent. Emma continued in perfect, fluent Arabic. "And for your information, my mama has a master's degree in engineering from Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico. She speaks 4 languages and works 3 jobs to take care of me. You might have more money, but you have much less class." The color drained from Omar's face. Other diners had stopped eating, staring at the extraordinary little girl who had just delivered a linguistic knockout punch. Sarah rushed to her daughter's side, torn between pride and terror. "Emma, please." But Emma wasn't finished. Switching back to English, she looked directly at Omar. "And if you're wondering how I learned Arabic, I taught myself online because I wanted to help Mama communicate with customers like you. I also speak Spanish, French, and Mandarin. How many languages do you speak?" Omar sat frozen, his mouth slightly open, unable to form words. The elderly restaurant owner, Mr. Hassan, appeared from the kitchen, having heard the commotion. His weathered face broke into a smile as he began clapping slowly. "Well done, little one," he said in accented English. "Well done indeed." Other customers joined the applause. Omar looked around the room, seeing faces that ranged from amused to disgusted, all of them staring at him. Emma tilted her head, studying Omar with the brutal honesty that only children possess. "My mama always says that money can't buy respect, sir. Maybe you should remember that." Omar's carefully constructed world began to crumble. as he realized that this 7-year-old girl had just exposed him as the very thing he'd tried so hard to distance himself from, a man who had forgotten where he came from. But as he looked into Emma's fearless eyes, something else stirred within him, something he hadn't felt in years. And that's when he noticed it, a small scar above Emma's left eyebrow and the way she protectively stood in front of her mother. This little girl reminded him of someone he'd lost long ago, someone who would have been about Emma's age now. Omar sat in his black Lamborghini outside the restaurant for 40 minutes, his hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. The valet had long since given up trying to approach the car, retreating to the safety of the restaurant's entrance, where he watched this strange billionaire having what appeared to be a complete breakdown. That little girl's words echoed in his mind like a broken record. "Money can't buy respect, sir. Maybe you should remember that." The worst part wasn't the public humiliation. Omar had weathered hostile takeovers and boardroom betrayals that would have crushed lesser men. The worst part was that she was absolutely right. Every word that 7-year-old had spoken was a mirror reflecting back the monster he'd become. He pulled out his phone and stared at his wallpaper, a photo from 10 years ago. A 16-year-old Omar stood next to his younger sister Layla, both of them grinning outside their family's small grocery store in Dearborn, Michigan. Their father's hands were stained with the honest dirt of hard work. Their mother wore her hijab with quiet dignity, and they'd all believed that America truly was the land of opportunity, before the oil discovery on their grandfather's abandoned land in Syria, before the inheritance lawyers, before the investment empire, before he'd forgotten who he was. Layla would have been 17 now, would have been starting her senior year of high school, would have been applying to universities, dreaming of becoming a doctor, talking about changing the world one patient at a time. Would have been. His phone buzzed insistently with notifications, board meetings, investment calls, society galas. The life that had consumed him since her death, the life he'd built brick by bloody brick to bury his pain and ensure he'd never be powerless again. Omar closed his eyes and remembered Layla's last words to him in the ICU, her voice barely a whisper through the machines keeping her alive. "Promise me you won't become like them, Omar. Promise me you'll remember where we came from. Promise me you'll use the money to help people like us, not forget people like us." He'd broken that promise so completely, it felt like murdering her all over again. The next morning, Omar stood outside Al-Rashid Industries, the 70-story monument to his success, piercing the Chicago skyline like a steel and glass middle finger to everyone who'd ever doubted him. His assistant Jennifer hurried toward him in her usual perfectly tailored panic, clutching her tablet and a stack of contracts that represented millions of dollars in deals. "Sir, the Shanghai acquisition needs your signature by noon, and the Peterson merger documents are ready for review. The mayor's office called about the downtown development project, and your attorney needs to discuss the lawsuit against—" "Cancel my meetings," Omar said quietly, staring up at the building that bore his name. Jennifer blinked rapidly, certain she'd misheard. "I'm sorry, sir. Cancel everything for the rest of the week." "But, sir, the Peterson acquisition alone is worth $40 million, and if we don't close by Friday—" Omar turned to face her, and Jennifer saw something in his eyes she'd never seen in their 5 years of working together. Something that looked dangerously like vulnerability. "Tell me something, Jennifer," Omar said softly. "In all the years you've worked for me, have you ever seen me do anything that wasn't about making more money?" Jennifer opened her mouth, then closed it, the question clearly catching her off guard. "Have you ever seen me help someone without expecting something in return? Have you ever seen me show kindness to someone who couldn't do anything for me? "Sir, you're very generous with the company's charitable donations." "Tax write-offs," Omar interrupted. "Every single one calculated for maximum benefit to my bottom line. That's not generosity, Jennifer, that's accounting." Jennifer stood frozen, her tablet clutched against her chest like a shield. "There are more important things than money, Jennifer. I'm just now remembering that." Omar looked back up at his building, seeing it for the first time, not as a monument to his success, but as a tomb for his soul. "Clear my schedule. I have some promises to keep." Sarah's alarm buzzed at 4:30 a.m., just like every morning for the past 3 years. The sound cut through her dreams like a knife, dragging her back to the harsh reality of bills and responsibilities and a future that seemed to grow more distant with each passing day. She rolled out of bed in their tiny studio apartment, her joints protesting from yesterday's 12-hour shift, on her feet. In the pale pre-dawn light filtering through their single window, she could see Emma curled up on the pull-out couch that served as her bed, clutching her worn copy of Charlotte's Web, a book she'd read so many times the pages were falling out. The apartment was smaller than some people's closets, but Sarah had tried to make it a home. Emma's artwork covered every available wall space. Drawings of faraway places she'd seen in her language-learning videos, certificates from online courses she'd completed, math tests with perfect scores that should have been hanging in a house with a yard and a dog and a father who came home for dinner. Sarah kissed Emma's forehead gently and whispered, "I'll be back before you wake up, mi amor. Study hard today." Her first job started at 5 a.m., cleaning office buildings downtown for a company that paid minimum wage and offered no benefits. She'd scrub toilets used by people who made in a day what she made in a month, emptying trash cans filled with the discarded remnants of lives she could only dream about. By 7 a.m., she'd rush across town to her second job at a community medical clinic, translating for Spanish-speaking patients who couldn't afford private health care. The work broke her heart daily. Mothers bringing sick children they couldn't afford to treat, elderly people rationing medication because they had to choose between pills and food. Then, after a 15-minute lunch consisting of whatever she could grab from a vending machine, came her evening shift at Amara's garden. The longest shift, the hardest shift, serving food to people who looked through her like she was invisible. On the crowded L train heading downtown, pressed between construction workers and office cleaners and other invisible people who kept the city running, Sarah clutched her nursing textbook like a lifeline. She'd been taking online classes for 2 years, slowly, painfully working toward her RN degree while working 3 jobs and raising Emma alone. One day she promised herself she'd give Emma the life she deserved. One day they'd live in a house with more than one room. One day Emma wouldn't have to do homework at restaurant tables while her mother worked. A tear slipped down her cheek as she remembered yesterday's encounter with the cruel billionaire. She'd endured worse than his insults before. Customers who grabbed her, who called her names, who treated her like she was less than human simply because she served their food. But seeing Emma witness such cruelty, seeing her baby girl have to defend her mother against a grown man's vicious words, it had broken something inside her that she wasn't sure could be repaired. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor who watched Emma in the mornings for $20 a week. Money Sarah could barely afford, but had no choice but to spend. Emma, asking about yesterday, says she wants to learn Korean now to help the new family upstairs. This child's heart is too big for this world. Take care of yourself, Miha. Sarah smiled through her tears, her heart swelling with pride and breaking with worry in equal measure. Emma's kindness was a gift from God, but it also terrified her. In their neighborhood, kindness could be seen as weakness. Generosity could be seen as an invitation to be taken advantage of. As the train pulled into her stop with a screech of metal on metal, Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello?" she answered warily. "Mrs. Martinez? This is Omar al-Rashid from yesterday. I I need to speak with you." Sarah's blood went cold, her grip tightening on the phone. Rich men who felt humiliated rarely let things go. Rich men who'd been embarrassed in public by a poor woman's child often sought revenge. "Please don't call me again," she whispered, looking around the train car to see if anyone was listening. "Wait! Please! I'm not calling to threaten you. I'm calling to apologize, sincerely, completely apologize, and to ask, could I speak with Emma?" The line went quiet for so long, Omar thought she'd hung up. Sarah stared at her reflection in the train window, seeing a young woman aged beyond her years by struggle and sacrifice. "Stay away from my daughter," Sarah finally said, her voice steel wrapped in silk. "Stay away from us both." The call ended, leaving Omar staring at his phone in his empty penthouse, surrounded by art worth millions and furniture that cost more than most people's cars. All of it suddenly feeling like a museum dedicated to his own loneliness. 3 days later, Omar stood across the street from Lincoln Elementary School, watching the children pour out through the front doors like a river of backpacks and laughter and innocent dreams. He felt like a predator, lurking in the shadows, but he couldn't get that little girl out of his mind. Emma had haunted his dreams for 3 nights straight, not just her words, but her fearless stance as she defended her mother, the way she'd switched languages like she was changing clothes. The intelligence that blazed in her 7-year-old eyes like a fire that could illuminate the world, if it wasn't extinguished by poverty and limited opportunities. When he spotted Emma's familiar pigtails bouncing as she walked, his heart clenched, with a pain he hadn't felt since Layla's funeral. She walked alone, which broke his heart, a heavy backpack almost as big as she was weighing her down. But even burdened, she stopped to help a younger boy who'd dropped his lunch money, kneeling on the dirty sidewalk to collect the scattered coins, just like Layla would have done. "Emma," Omar called softly, stepping out from behind a parked car. She turned, and her face immediately hardened with the kind of suspicion that no 7-year-old should ever have to learn. "You're the mean man from the restaurant." "Yes, and I came here to apologize to you." Omar knelt down to her level, noting how she took a protective step backward. "What I said about your mother was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong." Emma studied his face with those intelligent eyes, tilting her head like a small judge weighing evidence. "Mama says sorry is just a word, unless there are actions behind it. She says people who hurt others and then just say sorry are like people who break windows and then offer to pay for them. The window is still broken." Omar felt like she'd just delivered a PhD-level philosophy lesson disguised as a child's wisdom. "Your mother is very wise. That's exactly why I'm here." He pulled out a thick envelope. "I want to do something to show how sorry I am." Emma looked at the envelope but didn't take it, her small hands clasped behind her back. "What is it?" "A scholarship. For language immersion programs. You could learn Mandarin in Beijing, practice your Arabic in Jordan, perfect your French in Paris. You could see the world, Emma. You could learn from native speakers and experience different cultures and, for the first time, Emma's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Omar could see her mind racing, imagining herself in foreign countries, speaking with people in their own languages, becoming the bridge between worlds that her gift clearly meant her to be. Then just as quickly the light died, reality crashing back down like a heavy curtain. "We can't afford that," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of every dream deferred by poverty. "It's completely paid for. Everything, flights, hotels, food, tutors, materials, as an apology for my terrible behavior." Emma stepped back again, her mother's warnings clearly echoing in her young mind. "Mama says never to take things from strangers. She says people who give expensive gifts always want something back, and what they want back is usually more than what they gave." "I'm not trying to hurt you, Emma. You remind me of someone very special. Someone I lost." Emma's suspicion softened slightly, her natural empathy, the same trait that had made her defend her mother so fiercely, beginning to surface. Who? My little sister. She would have been about your age when she died. She loved languages too. She was teaching herself sign language because she wanted to help deaf kids at her school. Before Emma could respond, a voice cut through the air like a mother lion's roar. "Get away from my daughter!" Sarah was running toward them, terror and fury blazing in her eyes like twin flames. She had clearly seen them from down the block and sprinted the entire way, her work uniform wrinkled, her hair escaping from its ponytail. She grabbed Emma and pulled her back, placing herself between her daughter and Omar like a human shield. "I told you to stay away from us." "Sarah, please, I just wanted to—" "I don't care what you wanted." Sarah's voice shook with the kind of rage that comes from a mother's deepest fears. Rich men don't just show up at elementary schools to help poor kids out of the goodness of their hearts. What do you really want? What's your angle? Omar stood slowly, his hands raised peacefully, trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. "I want to make amends for what I said, for who I've become, for forgetting where I came from." Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it, only bitter experience with men who promised the world and delivered heartbreak. You never had to struggle for anything in your life." Omar's jaw tightened, and for a moment Sarah saw something flicker across his face, pain that looked remarkably like her own. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're the kind of man who insults hard-working mothers in foreign languages, thinking we're too stupid to understand." Sarah pulled Emma closer, her protective instincts in full war mode. "I know you're the kind of man who shows up at children's schools when their mothers tell them to stay away. Stay away from us, or I'm calling the police. And if you think your money will protect you from a mother protecting her child, you're about to learn just how wrong rich men can be." As they walked away, Emma looked back over her shoulder. Omar was still standing there, looking lost and broken and utterly alone. "Mama," Emma whispered, tugging on her mother's sleeve. "I think he's sadder than he is mean." Sarah's steps faltered for just a moment, but she didn't turn around. That evening, Sarah sat at their tiny kitchen table, really just a card table she'd bought at a garage sale and covered with a cheerful tablecloth, helping Emma with homework while her own nursing textbooks lay unopened beside her. The scholarship offer haunted her thoughts like a beautiful ghost she couldn't quite banish. The numbers in Emma's math workbook blurred as Sarah's mind wandered to the envelope Omar had held. What kind of opportunities could be inside? What doors could it open for Emma? What future could it buy that Sarah's 3 jobs and sleepless nights never could? "Mama, why can't we trust the sad man?" Emma asked, not looking up from her multiplication problems. Sarah's pen stopped moving across her own notebook, where she'd been taking notes about pediatric medication dosages. "What do you mean, mi amor?" He said sorry. And he looked hurt, like when you cry at night sometimes. Emma's voice was matter-of-fact, but it hit Sarah like a physical blow. Sarah's heart clenched painfully. She thought Emma was asleep during those quiet moments of despair when the weight of everything threatened to crush her. Those nights when she'd stare at the ceiling and wonder if she was failing her daughter, if love alone was enough when the world demanded so much more. "Sometimes people seem sorry, but they want something else," Sarah explained carefully, setting down her pen and giving Emma her full attention. "Rich people especially. They think everything and everyone can be bought. They think their money makes them entitled to whatever they want. But what if he really is sorry?" Emma's question was innocent, but it cut straight to the heart of Sarah's biggest fear, that her own past was making her too protective, too suspicious, too quick to slam doors that might lead to Emma's dreams. Sarah set down her pen and looked at her daughter, this incredible little person who saw the world with such hope despite everything they'd endured. Despite living in a studio apartment where the heat didn't always work, despite wearing second-hand clothes and eating generic cereal and watching other kids get picked up by fathers who actually stayed. Emma, when your daddy left us, he said he was sorry too. He said he wanted to help, that he'd send money, that he'd visit. He made promises about the life we'd have together. Sarah's voice caught slightly. But he never came back. He never sent money. He never even called to see how you were doing. Emma nodded solemnly, her pencil hovering over her homework. At 7, she'd already learned that promises could break as easily as toys, that adults could lie as naturally as breathing, that hope could be a dangerous thing when you had so little to spare. I just don't want you to get hurt, baby. We're doing fine on our own. But they weren't fine, and Emma knew it with the terrible clarity that poverty forces on children too young to understand why the world works the way it does. She'd seen her mother collapse from exhaustion on the couch, still wearing her work uniform. She'd heard the worried phone calls about rent money, the careful calculations about whether they could afford both groceries and the electric bill. She'd pretended not to notice when Sarah skipped meals so Emma could have seconds, claiming she wasn't hungry when Emma knew she hadn't eaten all day. Meanwhile, across town, in a penthouse that cost more per month than most people made in a year, Omar sat in his study, surrounded by photographs of Layla, her high school graduation picture, her acceptance letter to pre-med at University of Michigan. Her last birthday, when she'd blown out 17 candles and made a wish that would never come true. His sister's death certificate lay open on his mahogany desk next to a private investigator's report he'd commissioned years ago. The report detailed every aspect of the case: the drunk driver who'd run the red light, the wealthy family who'd hired the best lawyers money could buy, the judge who'd accepted a campaign contribution that happened to coincide with a reduced sentence. Richard Morrison III, 22 years old, son of a real estate mogul. Heir to a fortune built on luxury developments, he'd been drunk enough to kill, but rich enough to live. He'd served 8 months in a minimum security facility that was more like a country club than a prison. That's when Omar had vowed to become richer than anyone who could hurt him, rich enough to buy justice when the system failed. Rich enough to buy safety for anyone he loved, rich enough to never ever be powerless again. But somewhere along the way, he'd become the very thing he hated, someone who used wealth as a weapon, who looked down on people struggling to survive, who forgot that behind every service worker was a human being with dreams and fears and children to protect. His phone rang, startling him from his dark thoughts. Jennifer's name flashed on the screen. "Sir, there's a problem with the Martinez situation." Omar's blood went cold, his grip tightening on the phone. "What situation?" "After you asked me to research the family's background for the scholarship verification, well, I discovered something concerning. Sarah Martinez has been reporting her income incorrectly on Emma's school enrollment forms." "What do you mean?" Omar's voice was dangerously quiet. "She listed a false address to get Emma into Lincoln Elementary, which is outside their district. She underreported her income to qualify for the free lunch program. If the school board finds out, Emma could be immediately removed from her current school and placed in the district school for their actual address, which happens to be in one of the worst neighborhoods in Chicago." Omar closed his eyes, feeling sick. He'd asked Jennifer to research the family to help them, and instead he'd uncovered information that could destroy Emma's education. "Are you threatening them, Jennifer?" "I'm telling you that you have leverage, sir. If you want to help that family, this might be your only chance to make them listen to reason." Omar stared at Layla's photograph, imagining what she'd think of him using a mother's desperation to force compliance. His sister would be disgusted by what he was considering, but it might be the only way to give Emma the opportunities she deserved. The question was, would saving Emma's future require destroying her trust in him forever? 2 weeks later, Sarah received a letter that made her blood turn to ice water in her veins. The Chicago Public Schools Office of Enrollment was investigating discrepancies in Emma's school registration paperwork. They had received an anonymous tip regarding falsified address and income information. If the investigation concluded that false information had been provided, Emma would be immediately transferred to her district school, Benjamin Franklin Elementary, in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the city. Sarah had seen the news reports about Franklin Elementary, metal detectors at the doors, police stationed in the hallways, test scores that condemned children to futures as limited as their zip codes. It was exactly the kind of school she'd lied to avoid, exactly the future she'd sacrificed everything to prevent. She knew exactly who was behind this attack on her family. That evening, Sarah stormed into the elegant marble lobby of Al-Rashid Industries, like an avenging angel dressed in a waitress uniform. The security guard, a man who probably made more in a month than Sarah made in 3, tried to stop her with condescending politeness. "Ma'am, you can't just get out of my way," Sarah snarled, pushing past him toward the private elevator she'd researched online. "I have business with your boss." "Ma'am, you need an appointment. He made this appointment when he decided to destroy my daughter's life." The security guard reached for his radio, but Sarah was already in the elevator, jabbing the button for the penthouse with enough force to express every ounce of her fury. Omar was waiting in his office when the doors opened, standing behind his massive mahogany desk like a general preparing for war. The office was a monument to wealth and power, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city, artwork worth more than most people's houses, furniture that whispered of money and influence and the ability to crush anyone who stood in the way. "You bastard," Sarah whispered, her voice shaking with rage so pure it was almost holy. "Sarah, please let me explain." "Explain what?" Sarah's voice rose to a roar that echoed off the expensive walls. "Explain how you're trying to destroy my daughter's life because we wouldn't take your money. Explain how you decided to punish a 7-year-old girl because her mother had the audacity to tell you no." Omar stood slowly from behind his desk, and Sarah could see something flickering in his eyes. Pain, regret, something that looked almost like shame. "I'm trying to save her life. By threatening to take away her school? By using private investigators to dig up dirt on a single mother working 3 jobs?" Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "What kind of monster are you? The kind who knows that Emma needs more than you can give her." Omar's voice rose to match hers, years of buried pain erupting like a volcano. "She's brilliant, Sarah, gifted beyond anything I've ever seen. She has the potential to change the world, to be anything she wants to be. And you're so proud, so determined to do everything alone, that you're going to let that potential die in poverty." Sarah's hand flew before she realized it, the slap echoing through the office like a gunshot. Omar's head snapped to the side, but he didn't move away, didn't retaliate, didn't even lift his hand to his cheek. "You don't get to decide what's best for my daughter," Sarah said through tears of rage and heartbreak. "You don't get to blackmail us into accepting your charity. You don't get to threaten everything I've worked for just because you have more money than God." Doom. Omar touched his cheek where her hand had left its mark, then walked to the wall of windows, overlooking the city where millions of people struggled and dreamed and fought for better lives. "You want to know why I really care about Emma? I don't care about because she's exactly like my sister was." Omar's voice broke slightly, the words forced through a throat tight with emotion. "Brilliant, fearless, kind to everyone, even people who didn't deserve it, even people who were cruel to her." Sarah's anger faltered slightly, her natural empathy warring with her protective fury. What happened to her? Omar turned from the window and Sarah saw tears streaming down his face, the first genuine emotion she'd seen from this man who seemed to be made of money and arrogance. She was killed by a drunk driver when she was 17. 3 weeks before she was supposed to start at University of Michigan, she was going to be a pediatric surgeon. The office fell silent, except for the hum of the city below and the sound of two broken people trying to breathe through their pain. The driver was Richard Morrison III, son of one of the wealthiest real estate families in Michigan. They hired the best lawyers, paid the right people, and he served 8 months in a facility that was more like a resort than a prison. Omar's voice was hollow, empty of everything except grief. I built this empire to make sure no one could ever hurt someone I loved again, but I became the very monster I was trying to fight. Sarah wiped her eyes, seeing this man clearly for the first time, not as a predator, but as a brother still grieving his lost sister. When I saw Emma defend you that night, it was like seeing Layla again, like getting a chance to protect someone the way I couldn't protect her. Omar pulled out a thick folder from his desk. The scholarship isn't charity, Sarah. It's an investment in someone who could change the world if she gets the chance. Sarah looked at the folder, then back at Omar's tear-stained face. What exactly are you offering? Omar opened the folder with hands that trembled slightly. Full academic support through graduate school. Language immersion programs in 12 countries. The best tutors money can buy, a guaranteed position in my international division when she's ready, where she can use those languages to help people like us, people the world tries to ignore. Sarah's hands shook as she looked at numbers that represented more money than she'd see in 3 lifetimes. What's the catch? Omar met her eyes, and for the first time she saw complete honesty there. No catch. Just a promise that you'll let Emma reach her potential, that you won't let pride prevent her from having opportunities, that you'll trust me to honor my sister's memory by protecting the gift your daughter has been given. Sarah closed the folder, her mind reeling. I need time to think. Of course, but Sarah... Omar's voice was gentle, stripped of all arrogance. Think about what Emma would want. Not what your pride wants, not what your fear wants, what Emma would want. As Sarah left the building, folder clutched against her chest like a shield. She realized that for the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about survival. She was thinking about possibilities, but she still didn't know if she could trust the man offering them, or if she could trust herself to make the right choice. Sarah spent 3 sleepless nights staring at Omar's folder, the papers spread across her kitchen table, like tarot cards that could predict Emma's future. The numbers blurred together through her exhausted tears, tuition costs, travel expenses, living stipends, all adding up to a fortune that could transform her daughter's life forever. On the 4th morning, Emma found her mother asleep at the table, her head pillowed on financial documents worth more than their apartment building. "Mama," Emma whispered, gently shaking Sarah's shoulder. "Are those the papers from the sad man?" Sarah jerked awake, immediately trying to gather the documents before Emma could see them. But it was too late. Emma's quick eyes had already absorbed every detail. "Is that really how much it costs to learn languages in other countries?" Emma asked, her 7-year-old voice filled with wonder and heartbreak in equal measure. Sarah pulled her daughter onto her lap, breathing in the familiar scent of Johnson's baby shampoo and childhood innocence. "It's a lot of money, baby." "More money than we'll ever have," Emma said matter-of-factly, and Sarah's heart shattered at how easily her daughter accepted their limitations. "Emma, if you could go anywhere in the world to learn, where would you want to go?" Emma's eyes lit up like fireworks. "China. I want to see the Great Wall and learn Mandarin from real Chinese kids. And France, because French sounds like music when people speak it. And maybe Egypt, because I want to understand the hieroglyphs and learn Arabic the way it's supposed to sound." Sarah closed her eyes, Seeing her daughter's dreams painted in vivid detail, Emma walking through ancient streets, speaking confidently with children from different cultures, becoming the bridge between worlds that her gift clearly meant her to be. What if I told you that might be possible? Emma's excitement dimmed immediately. We can't afford it, Mama. I know we can't. What if someone wanted to help us afford it? Emma was quiet for a long moment, her intelligent mind working through the implications. The sad man with the nice suit. His name is Omar, and yes, he wants to pay for everything. Why would he do that? Sarah struggled to find words that a 7-year-old could understand. Because he lost someone he loved very much, someone who was young and smart like you, and helping you makes him feel like he's honoring her memory. Emma nodded solemnly. Like when I put flowers on Abuela's grave, because it makes me feel close to her. Exactly like that. Do you trust him, Mama? Sarah looked at her daughter, this remarkable little person who deserved every opportunity in the world, and made the hardest decision of her life. I'm going to try to trust him. For you. That afternoon, Sarah called Omar's office, with hands that shook so badly she could barely dial the number. I accept, she said simply when he answered. The silence stretched so long, Sarah thought the call had dropped. Thank you, Omar finally whispered, and Sarah could hear tears in his voice. Thank you for giving me the chance to do something right. 2 months later, Emma stood in the departure lounge at O'Hare International Airport, clutching a passport that felt like a golden ticket to Wonderland. Her small suitcase was packed with notebooks, dictionaries, and enough determination to power a small city. Sarah knelt beside her daughter, fighting back tears that threatened to ruin her carefully applied makeup. Omar had arranged for a professional photographer to document Emma's first trip to Montreal for a 3-week French immersion program, and Sarah wanted to look strong for the pictures that would commemorate this moment forever. Remember what we practiced, Sarah said, smoothing Emma's hair for the 100th time. Be respectful, be curious, and remember that I'm representing our family, Emma finished, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what lay ahead. I won't let you down, Mama. Omar approached, carrying a small gift bag, his usual confident demeanor replaced by nervous energy. Over the past 2 months, he'd transformed from the arrogant billionaire Sarah had slapped into something approaching a friend, or at least an ally in ensuring Emma's success. I have something for you, he said, kneeling to Emma's level. For good luck. Inside the bag was a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant shaped like the globe. My sister Layla wore this when she gave her first presentation in French class. She would want you to have it. Emma held the necklace reverently, understanding the weight of the gift. I'll take good care of it, and I'll make her proud. You already have, Omar said softly. As Emma's flight was called, Sarah felt her world splitting in two. Pride and terror warring in her chest. She'd never been separated from Emma for more than a day, and now her baby was flying to another country to live with a host family she'd only met through video calls. What if she gets scared? Sarah whispered to Omar as they watched Emma board the plane with her group. Then she'll handle it with the same courage she showed when she defended you that night, Omar replied. She's stronger than both of us, Sarah. That little girl is going to change the world. 3 weeks later, Emma returned, speaking French with a Quebec accent and carrying stories that tumbled out of her like treasures from a magic box. She'd helped her host family's grandmother translate letters from relatives in Haiti. She'd taught English songs to kids at a local school. She'd negotiated a discount at a market using her new French vocabulary, charming the vendors with her enthusiasm. Mama, I want to learn sign language next, Emma announced over dinner at their tiny table. There was a deaf boy in my class, and I could only communicate with him through pictures. I want to be able to talk with everyone. Sarah looked at Omar, who'd joined them for dinner. a tradition that had started as a business meeting and evolved into something that felt dangerously like family. "Sign language classes are already arranged," Omar said with a smile, "starting next month." But as Emma chatted excitedly about her adventures, neither Sarah nor Omar noticed the man in the expensive suit watching their building from across the street. Richard Morrison III had been tracking Omar's activities for months, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back at the man who'd spent years trying to destroy his family's business empire. And now Omar had given him the perfect target. The first threat came in the form of a manila envelope slipped under Sarah's apartment door at 3 a.m. Inside were photographs of Emma entering and leaving Omar's office building, time-stamped and annotated with addresses and schedules. A note written in block letters read, "Pretty little girl. It would be a shame if something happened to her new opportunities." Sarah's hands shook as she called Omar, the envelope's contents spread across her kitchen table like evidence from a crime scene. "He found us," Omar said grimly after seeing the photos. "Richard Morrison. I should have known he'd eventually retaliate." "Who is Richard Morrison?" Sarah demanded, clutching the phone with white knuckles. "The drunk driver who killed my sister. I've spent years systematically dismantling his family's business empire. Every crooked deal, every bribed official, every tax dodge. I've exposed them all. His father lost everything, and Richard blames me for destroying his inheritance." Sarah felt her world tilting off its axis. "You brought this danger to my daughter. I thought I'd broken him completely. I thought he was too weak to fight back." "You thought wrong." Sarah's voice cracked with terror and fury. "My daughter is in danger because of your vendetta." Omar was quiet for a long moment. "Yes, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect her." The next morning, Emma found her mother packing their few belongings with desperate efficiency. "Are we moving, Mama? We're going away for a while, mi amor. A little vacation." But Emma was too smart to believe the lie. "Is someone trying to hurt us?" Sarah's hands stilled on her suitcase. She'd never lied to Emma about the hard realities of their life, and she wasn't about to start now. "There's a bad man who wants to hurt Omar by hurting us, so we need to go somewhere safe until Omar can make the bad man stop." Emma nodded with the terrible maturity that poverty and hardship had forced upon her. "Where will we go?" "I don't know yet." That's when Omar appeared at their door, flanked by two men in dark suits who looked like they ate danger for breakfast and asked for seconds. "You're not going anywhere alone," Omar said firmly. "I have a safe house in Montana. Mountains, fresh air, and security that would make the Secret Service jealous." "I can't accept more help from you," Sarah protested. "You've already done too much, and look where it's gotten us." "This isn't charity anymore, Sarah. This is responsibility. I brought this threat into your lives, and I'm going to end it." Emma tugged on Omar's sleeve, looking up at him with eyes far too serious for a 7-year-old. "Are you going to hurt the bad man, like he hurt your sister?" Omar knelt down, meeting her gaze with complete honesty. "I'm going to make sure he can never hurt anyone ever again. But I'm going to do it the right way this time. Promise?" "I promise." As they loaded into Omar's armored SUV, Sarah caught a glimpse of a black sedan following them 3 cars back. The threat was real, immediate, and closing in. But she also saw something else in Omar's eyes, a determination that went beyond money or revenge. For the first time since this nightmare began, he wasn't just trying to honor his dead sister's memory, he was trying to protect his new family. The safe house in Montana was a fortress disguised as a luxury cabin, nestled in a valley surrounded by snow-capped peaks that stretched toward heaven. For 3 days, they lived in a bubble of artificial normalcy. Emma studying Mandarin with online tutors, Sarah catching up on her nursing coursework, and Omar making phone calls that would determine their future. On the 4th morning, everything changed. Omar was on a video call with his security team when Emma wandered into his makeshift office, drawn by the sound of familiar words. "Wait," Emma said suddenly, staring at the laptop screen. "Rewind that recording." "Emma, this isn't—" Omar began, but she was already at his shoulder, her face pale with recognition. The recording was from a security camera outside their Chicago apartment building. A man in an expensive suit was clearly visible, placing the envelope under their door. "I know him," Emma whispered. Omar's blood went cold. "What do you mean you know him?" "He comes to the restaurant sometimes. Mr. Hassan always gets nervous when he sees him. He brings other men in suits, and they eat in the back corner and talk in low voices." Omar's hands flew over his keyboard, pulling up every piece of intelligence he had on Richard Morrison III. "Emma, are you absolutely certain?" "I never forget a face, especially not mean faces." Emma pointed at the screen. "He left big tips, but was rude to the servers. And one time, I heard him talking on the phone about someone named Omar who needed to be taught a lesson." The room fell silent, except for the sound of Omar's world reshaping itself around this new information. "He's been watching us for months," Omar realized, his voice hollow with the implications. "He knew about Emma before I ever offered the scholarship. He's been planning this from the beginning." Sarah appeared in the doorway, drawn by the tense voices. "Planning what?" Omar turned to face her, his expression grim. "Richard didn't just stumble upon us as targets. He's been surveilling Emma specifically because he knew she was the one thing that could hurt me more than anything else." "I don't understand." Omar pulled up another file on his computer, surveillance photos taken by his own security team. Images of Richard Morrison sitting in restaurants, following Emma to school, watching their apartment building. He figured out that Emma reminded me of Layla. He's been waiting for me to get attached, to care about her like I cared about my sister. This whole time, I thought I was protecting Emma by giving her opportunities. But I was actually marking her as a target. Sarah sank into a chair, the weight of this revelation crushing her. "So everything, the scholarship, the trips, the language programs, it was all putting Emma in more danger?" "No," Omar said firmly. "The danger existed whether I helped her or not. Richard would have found another way to hurt me. But now Emma has resources she didn't have before. Skills, education, connections. She's not just a victim anymore. She's a force to be reckoned with." Emma had been listening to this exchange with the serious attention she gave to everything important. Now she spoke up, her young voice cutting through the adult fear and uncertainty. "He made a mistake," she said simply. Both adults turned to stare at her. "The bad man made a mistake. He thought I was weak because I'm little. He thought Mama was weak because we're poor. He thought you were weak because you feel sad about your sister." Emma's eyes blazed with intelligence and determination. "But we're not weak. We're strong because we take care of each other." Omar stared at this remarkable child and realized she was absolutely right. Richard Morrison had spent months planning to exploit what he saw as Omar's weakness, his emotional attachment to Emma and Sarah. But what Richard hadn't counted on was that love wasn't a weakness. It was the strongest force in the universe, and he was about to learn that lesson the hard way. That night, while Emma slept peacefully in her room, overlooking the Montana wilderness, Omar and Sarah sat by the fireplace, planning something that would have seemed impossible 3 months ago, fighting back against a man who thought he could terrorize a family with impunity. "He's going to escalate," Omar said, studying the files spread across the coffee table. "The photographs were just the beginning. Richard wants me to know he can reach Emma any time he wants. Next, he'll make a direct move." Sarah wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, drawing comfort from its warmth. "What kind of move? Kidnapping, or worse?" Omar's voice was steady, But Sarah could see the fear beneath his controlled exterior. He wants to hurt me the way I hurt him, by taking away someone I love. The words hung in the air between them. Someone I love. It was the first time Omar had acknowledged out loud what had been growing between the three of them over the past months. "So what do we do?" Sarah asked. "We can't hide forever." "We don't hide. We set a trap." Omar pulled out his laptop and began typing rapidly. "Richard thinks he's hunting us, but he's wrong. We're going to turn the tables and hunt him." "How?" "By giving him exactly what he wants, a chance to grab Emma. But what he doesn't know is that we'll be ready for him." Sarah's protective instincts flared. "Absolutely not. I won't use my daughter as bait." "Sarah, listen to me." Omar turned the laptop screen toward her, showing a detailed floor plan. "This is my Chicago office building. 70 floors, state-of-the-art security and more cameras than the Pentagon. If we can lure Richard there, we can document every crime he commits and ensure he goes to prison for the rest of his life. And if something goes wrong, then I'll spend every penny I have and every favor I'm owed to keep Emma safe." Omar met her eyes. "But nothing will go wrong, because I won't let it." Sarah studied the man who'd transformed from her enemy into her ally, then into something deeper she wasn't ready to name. "What exactly are you proposing?" "We announce that Emma is receiving a special award at my company. We leak the information to Richard through channels I know he monitors. When he comes for her, we'll have FBI agents, security cameras, and enough evidence to put him away forever. It's risky. Everything worthwhile is risky, but doing nothing is riskier." Omar's voice softened. "Sarah, I've spent 5 years trying to destroy Richard Morrison through business deals and legal maneuvers. It's time to end this properly." The next morning, Emma found them still at the table, surrounded by plans and contingencies and backup scenarios. "Are we going home?" she asked, settling onto the couch between them. "Soon," Omar said. "But first, we need your help with something very important." Emma listened as they explained the plan, her expression growing more serious with each detail. When they finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Will this make the bad man stop hurting people forever?" "Yes," Omar said. "Will it keep other kids safe from him?" "Yes." Emma nodded decisively. "Then let's do it." Sarah pulled her daughter close, marveling at the courage contained in such a small package. "Are you scared, baby?" "A little," Emma admitted. "But I'm more brave than scared, and besides, you and Omar will be there to protect me." Omar felt his throat tighten with emotion. This little girl trusted him completely, despite the danger his presence had brought into her life. He wouldn't let her down. 3 days later, they returned to Chicago to execute a plan that would either end Richard Morrison's threat forever or destroy everything they'd built together. But as their plane descended through the clouds toward O'Hare Airport, none of them noticed the black sedan waiting in the airport parking garage. Richard Morrison had plans of his own, and he'd been waiting a very long time to put them into motion. The Al-Rashid Industries building gleamed in the afternoon sunlight as Emma walked through the lobby, wearing her best dress, a navy blue outfit Omar had bought for the occasion. Hidden throughout the 70 floors were FBI agents, security personnel, and enough surveillance equipment to record every breath Richard Morrison took. But as Emma stepped into the elevator with Sarah and Omar, none of them expected what was about to unfold. "Remember, stay close to us," Sarah whispered, her hand finding Emma's small one. "I will, Mama." Emma's voice was steady, but Omar could see the tension in her young shoulders. The elevator climbed toward the executive conference room, where Emma would supposedly receive her International Young Linguist Award. Bait, designed to draw Richard into their trap. But as they reached the 40th floor, the elevator shuddered to a stop. "That's not supposed to happen," Omar muttered, reaching for his phone. No signal. The doors opened to reveal Richard Morrison III, standing in the hallway, flanked by two men whose expensive suits couldn't hide their dangerous intentions. Behind him stood a woman Omar recognized with shock, Jennifer, his former assistant. "Hello, Omar," Richard said with a smile that belonged in nightmares. "Surprised to see me? You shouldn't be. After all, you taught me everything I know about patience and planning." "Jennifer," Omar's voice was hollow with betrayal. "You've been working for him." "For 3 years," Jennifer replied coldly, "ever since you destroyed my family's construction business in your war against the Morrisons. Did you think your vendetta only hurt Richard? My father lost everything because of your justice. He killed himself rather than face bankruptcy." Sarah pulled Emma behind her, every maternal instinct screaming danger. "Let us leave. Your fight is with Omar, not with us." "Oh, but you're wrong," Richard said, stepping closer. "This beautiful little girl is the key to everything. You see, Omar thinks I want to hurt him, but that's not quite right." Richard pulled out a manila folder, his eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. "Tell me, Omar, what do you really know about Emma Martinez?" "She's a brilliant child who deserves every opportunity in the world," Omar replied fiercely. "She's also the daughter of Maria Elena Vasquez," Richard continued, watching Omar's face carefully. "Does that name ring a bell?" Omar's blood went cold. Maria Elena Vasquez had been his sister Layla's best friend, the girl who was supposed to be in the car the night Layla died, but had gotten sick at the last minute. "No," Omar whispered. "That's impossible." Richard's smile widened. Maria Elena moved to Mexico after the accident, consumed with guilt for surviving when her best friend died. She met Roberto Martinez, married him, and had a daughter. When Roberto abandoned them, she brought little Emma back to America, changed her own name to Sarah to avoid being found. Sarah's face had gone white as paper. "How did you—" "Because I've been tracking everyone connected to that night for years," Richard snarled, "waiting for the perfect moment to make Omar understand what real loss feels like." Omar stared at Sarah, at Maria Elena, as 15 years of lies crumbled around him. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was terrified," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I knew you blamed me for surviving when Layla didn't. I knew you'd hate me for living when she died." "I could never hate you," Omar said softly. "I could never hate Layla's best friend." Richard laughed harshly. "How touching. But here's the beautiful part, Omar. Sarah, has been lying to you about more than just her name." He pulled out another document. "Emma isn't just any gifted child. She's not even Roberto Martinez's daughter." The hallway fell silent except for the hum of the building's ventilation system. "Emma's father," Richard continued with vicious satisfaction, "was Dr. Hassan al-Nasir, Layla's Arabic tutor, the man your sister was secretly in love with, the man she was going to meet the night she died." Emma looked up at Sarah with wide, confused eyes. "Mama?" Sarah collapsed against the wall, her legs giving out. "Hassan died in Syria before I could tell him about Emma, before I could tell anyone. I was 17 and pregnant and terrified." Omar felt his world reshaping itself completely. Emma wasn't just reminiscent of Layla. She was Layla's legacy, the daughter of the man his sister had loved, carrying the intellectual gifts that Layla had admired in her tutor. "Don't you see?" Richard pressed on. "This whole time you've been trying to honor your dead sister by helping the daughter of the man who took her away from her family the night she died. The irony is exquisite." But as Richard spoke, something unexpected happened. Emma stepped forward, her small chin raised with dignity that seemed far too mature for her 7 years. "You're wrong," she said clearly. "What?" Richard blinked, thrown off his script. "You're wrong about everything." Emma's voice grew stronger. "You think this is about who my father was or what my mother's real name is, but that's not what matters." She looked at Omar, with eyes that blazed with intelligence and compassion. Omar loves me because I'm me. Mama loves me because I'm hers. And we love Omar because he chose to be our family when he didn't have to. Emma turned to face Richard directly. You've spent all this time trying to hurt people because someone hurt you. But hurting people doesn't fix anything. It just makes more hurt. Idil, the little girl who had learned 5 languages, who had defended her mother in Arabic, who had traveled to foreign countries with fearless curiosity, stood in that hallway and delivered a lesson that cut through years of hatred and revenge. Your pain doesn't give you the right to cause pain, Emma said simply. My daddy in Syria died before he could meet me, but Omar chose to be my daddy anyway. That's what love is, choosing to care about someone even when it's hard. Omar felt tears streaming down his face as he knelt beside Emma. You're absolutely right. The spell that Richard had been weaving with his revelations shattered completely. Because regardless of genetics, regardless of names and histories and bitter ironies, the truth was simple. They were a family because they chose to be. Security burst into the hallway at that moment, alerted by the elevator's emergency stop. As FBI agents arrested Richard and Jennifer, Omar pulled Sarah and Emma into his arms. I don't care what your name used to be, he whispered to Sarah. I don't care about the past. I only care about our future. 6 months later, Omar stood in the backyard of their new house, a home with enough bedrooms for Emma's language books, a garden where Sarah could grow the herbs she remembered from her childhood, and space for the family they were building together. Emma was teaching sign language to the neighbor kids, her gift for languages now paired with a mission to help others communicate. Sarah had graduated from nursing school with honors and was working at the children's hospital where she could use her own experiences with struggle to help other families navigate their darkest moments. And Omar had discovered that the greatest fortune he could ever acquire wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in bedtime stories, family dinners, and the sound of Emma calling him Daddy Omar with complete trust and love. Richard Morrison was serving 15 years for kidnapping, extortion, and conspiracy. Jennifer had received a lighter sentence in exchange for testimony about his other crimes, but more importantly, the cycle of revenge had finally ended. As the sun set over their neighborhood, Emma ran to Omar with a letter from her pen pal in Beijing, a little girl who was learning English just as enthusiastically as Emma was mastering Mandarin. Look, Daddy Omar, Li Wei sent me a picture of her family. Omar looked at the photo. Another family in another country, building love across language barriers, and smiled. Some stories end with justice, some end with wealth. But the best stories, the ones that truly matter, end with love choosing itself again and again, creating families not from blood or circumstance, but from the simple, powerful decision to care for one another. Emma Martinez, daughter of Hassan and Maria Elena, protected by Sarah, loved by Omar, would go on to change the world, one language at a time. But first, she would go inside for dinner with her family, where love spoke every language that mattered.